Notes, check. Sunglasses, check. Hat, check. Thick skin, check. Let's go. Golden Blue Dude back with another video just for the college football fan. So hit that like and subscribe button if you are a college football fan. And go check out our Patreon page when you get a chance. A lot of perks over there. And don't forget our score prediction contest will start back up again in September. Every week we award $20 to whoever gets the closest to the exact score prediction of the game that I pick. The higher the Patreon, the more guesses you get. And you can win as many times as you want. Also, $5 and up Patreons get to pick the live stream that we're going to do. And you get to watch the game with me. And we have a great website designed and created by Joey Foster. Now, we all know that the NIL and the transfer portal is the center of a lot of conversations right now. Today, I wanted to talk about the transfer portal, specifically the top 10 teams as of right now when I recorded this video. So what I want to do is I want to look at the top 10 teams in the transfer portal, what they did last year, and how I think they'll finish this year. That way, we can determine if the transfer portal truly helped them. I'm going to do this in two parts. So in this video, I'll do 10 through 6, and in the next video, I'll do 5 through 1. So starting at number 10, right now, Arkansas is number 10 in the transfer portal. Last year, they finished 9-4, third in the SEC West. And that was actually pretty good if you go back and look at their schedule. That was a brutal schedule. So let's look at this year's schedule and how I think they'll finish this year for 2022. Then we'll see if the transfer portal actually helped them. So first, they get Cincinnati, but Cincinnati is going to take a big step back. So that's a win for Arkansas. Then they get South Carolina home. And I think South Carolina is going to be much better this year, but this is early in the season and it's a home game for Arkansas. So I think Arkansas beats South Carolina. Then they get FCS Missouri State. Easy win for Arkansas. After that, they get Texas A&M and Arlington. Last year, they surprisingly beat Texas A&M and Arlington. This year, I just think they repeat. They'll be expecting it, going in confident, and I think they get the win. Then they get Alabama at home. They'll have high hopes of beating Alabama at home, but Alabama's going to be on a whole other level this year. So I don't think Arkansas beats Alabama at home. After that, a tricky road trip to Mississippi State. We'll come back to that one. But after the road trip to Mississippi State, a road trip to BYU, I definitely think they lose that game. Then they get their bye week. After the bye week, another road game to Auburn. That's 3 road games in a row. Now back to the Mississippi State road game. I think Arkansas wins one of those road trips and loses one of those road trips. I don't know if it's Mississippi State or Auburn that they lose to, but they'll win one and lose one. So after the road trip to Auburn, they get Liberty at home. I think they beat Liberty. Then I think they split the next 2 games. LSU at home and Ole Miss at home. They'll win one, lose one. And then finally at Missouri. I think they beat Missouri on the road. So altogether, I have Arkansas going either 8-4 or 7-5. Arkansas lost a lot from their defense, so I don't think the transfer portal will make them a much better team this year. I just think it'll help them from falling off. It'll keep them where they're at. Next up, number 9, South Carolina. Last year, they finished 7-6, 5th in the SEC East. Shane Beamer has this team in the upward direction. Here's a look at their schedule. They get Georgia State at home. That's a win. Then that road trip to Arkansas, where I do think they lose. But then they get Georgia at home. You already know I have them upsetting Georgia, so I'm having that as a win for South Carolina. Then they get Charlotte home. That's a win. Then they get FCS South Carolina State. That's a win. But then a tricky road trip to Kentucky. And Kentucky's still going to be good. So I think that's a loss for South Carolina. But they do get a bye week, and that is perfectly placed because right after that, they get Texas A&M, who they've never beaten. But because of that bye week and because it's at home, I think South Carolina does beat Texas A&M. After that, they get Missouri at home. I think that's a win. On the road to Vanderbilt, pretty easy win right there. Tricky road trip to Florida, but I do think South Carolina is the better team. I think they go on the road and beat the Gators. They get Tennessee at home. If this was on the road, I'd have it as a loss, but it is at home, so I think South Carolina wins. And then finally at Clemson, where I do think they lose to Clemson. So I think South Carolina could go from 7-6 to 9-3. Yes, the transfer portal greatly helped South Carolina this year, but Shane Beamer already had South Carolina going in the right direction. So it's kind of a combo of things. Number 8 is UCLA. Why in the world people are not talking more about UCLA, I have no idea. I think they're going to be a good team. Last year, they were a decent team. They finished the season 8-4, third in the Pac-12 South. How does the transfer portal help them? Well, here's a look at their schedule. First, they get Bowling Green at home. That's a win. FCS Alabama State at home. That's a win. South Alabama at home. That's a win. They do go on the road to a bad Colorado, so I think they win there. Come back home to a better Washington. Still, I have UCLA winning that. Then they get Utah at home. And at first, I had that as a for sure loss, but the more I think about it, I think UCLA could beat Utah at home. After that game, they do get a bye week. Then they go on the road to Oregon, and I do think UCLA loses to Oregon on the road. But after that, they come back home to Stanford. I have that as a win for UCLA, and then they go on the road to a bad, and I mean a bad Arizona State. They will fall off a cliff. So I think UCLA wins that game. Come back home to Arizona, beat them, and then they get their arch rival USC at home. And yes, I think UCLA does beat USC at home. And then finally, after that, they go on the road, and I think they beat Cal. So I think UCLA could go 10-2 or possibly even 11-1, depending on if they beat Utah. So yes, I think the transfer portal will help UCLA in a significant way. But once again, Chip Kelly already has UCLA moving in the right direction. So I think it's a combination of things with UCLA as well, not just the transfer portal. Number 7 in the transfer portal, Nebraska. And last year they finished an abysmal 3-9, 6th in the Big Ten West. I think things do turn around for Nebraska this year. Here's a look at their schedule. First, they get Northwestern in Ireland. I think that's a win for Nebraska. Then they get FCS North Dakota at home. That's a win. Georgia Southern at home. I think that's a win. Then they get rival Oklahoma at home. And I think this game right here particularly helps Nebraska's season. I think they get a win. They get a bye week after the Oklahoma win. After that, they get Indiana at home. I think that's a win. Then on the road to Rutgers, that's a win. And then a tough road trip to Purdue. And I think Nebraska does go on the road and loses to Purdue. After that, they get their second bye week. They come back home, play Illinois. I think they beat Illinois. Then they get Minnesota at home. I also think they beat Minnesota, but then they go on the road to Michigan. I don't think Nebraska can go on the road and beat Michigan. I have that as a loss. Come back home to Wisconsin, and I think Nebraska beats Wisconsin this year. And then finally, the last game, a tough road trip to Iowa, and I think Nebraska loses to Iowa. But still, I have Nebraska jumping to as high as 9-3. Going from 3-9 to 9-3, that could be the biggest jump in win total in college football for 2022. So yes, I think the transfer portal significantly helps Nebraska, and it just might have saved Scott Frost's job. And finally, for this video, number 6 in the transfer portal is Alabama. Now look, Alabama is already an elite football program. I think the transfer portal is just a cherry on top this year. Last year, they went 13-2 SEC champs. Here's a look at their schedule. It is a little tricky. They get Utah State at home. I don't think they have any issues there. That's a win. On the road to Texas. Texas fans will be hyped for this game, thinking that they can win this. Alabama's going to smoke Texas. And they come back home to UL Monroe, easy win. And they get Vanderbilt at home, easy win. On the road to Arkansas, tough road environment, but I think Alabama gets the job done. They come back home to Texas A&M, and I do think Alabama gets the revenge against Texas A&M. I'm giving them a win. They go on the road to Tennessee. That will be a test, but I think Alabama's just so much better than Tennessee right now that they will win that football game. They come back home to Mississippi State. I think that's a win for Alabama. Then they get their bye week, and they'll need it. 2 tough road trips after the bye week, at LSU and at Ole Miss. And I do think Alabama could lose one of those games. But after that, they get FCS Austin Peay at home. That's obviously an easy win. And then they get Auburn at home in the Iron Bowl. I think Alabama gets the win there. So all in all, I think Alabama goes either undefeated 12-0 or 11-1. And yes, I think 11-1 is worst case scenario for Alabama. Now, is it because of the transfer portal? No. But the transfer portal is definitely a cherry on top for Alabama. They're going to be really, really good this year. So for Arkansas, I think the transfer portal keeps them from falling. They stay as is. For South Carolina, I definitely think the transfer portal helps them, but I think it's a combination with that and Shane Beamer. For UCLA, same thing. I think the transfer portal does help them, but it's a combination of that plus what Chip Kelly's doing. Now for Nebraska, I think the transfer portal definitely 100% helps them this year, and it could save Scott Frost's job. And then finally, for Alabama, it doesn't necessarily help them, but I think it's definitely a cherry on top for Alabama. So there you go. Tomorrow, I'll make part 2 of this video for teams 5 through 1 in the transfer portal. Y'all let me know what you think in the comments section. Do you agree? Or do you think the transfer portal helps more than what I'm saying for these teams? Or do you think the transfer portal helps these teams less than what I'm saying? As usual, I look forward to your comments in the comments section. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.